Welcome to another edition of the McAnulty Method. We're here with financial expert Frank McAnulty, Colin Sorrells, and our special guest today, Ash Serafin. Welcome, everybody.
Good to be here.
How you doing?
Hello.
Ash, thanks for joining us. And we appreciate it because you've got some very good questions here about mortgages and refinancing mortgages. And frankly, you can't listen to a radio or get online or watch TV without somebody wanting to sell you refinance your mortgage package. So I would like you to kick us off and ask some of the questions you have about refinancing mortgages.
For sure, yeah. A couple of them that I had is one, what does it actually mean to refinance your mortgage? Because it's never really explained, like as you said in those commercials. What are like the pros and cons to them? And then also just like what's the incentive behind refining on both the company and the customer side?
Well, let's start with the customer side first. Usually, there's two main reasons a person refinances. First, interest rates have gone down, so they can get a lower interest rate and hopefully lower their mortgage payment. That's been the big push the last few years as interest rates have gone down, which is great. Especially with online mortgage companies, it barely costs you anything, if anything, to do this, and you end up paying less each month in interest. Wonderful thing. The other reason people do it is to take money out of their houses. California, if you've owned your house for the last 10 years, it's gone up in value a lot. It's probably doubled in value. So you're sitting on a whole bunch of cash. And so, people are, I want to get a hold of that cash, which is also can be a good thing. It depends on what you're going to use the cash for. Because people forget that they're getting a normal mortgage is 30 years. So just because you have cash in your house and you've always wanted to go to Cancun doesn't mean you should refinance your house and use that money to go to Cancun, because you're going to be paying for that trip for the next 30 years. And I don't care how good it is. It's not worth 30 years worth of payments. So the rule of thumb is if you take money out of your house to either improve your house or invest in another appreciating asset, such as another piece of real estate, possibly put it in the stock market, a little bit riskier, something like that. But you don't take money out of your house to buy something that's going to go down in value or just spend money. Now, one exception, medical bills. When it comes to medical, you got to do what you got to do. And but we all hope that doesn't happen.
Well, that kind of explains why you'd want to refinance your mortgage. But Ash had a great question with the follow-up. What's in it for the refi companies? What do they get out of it?
That is a great question, because it used to be that the company that gave you the mortgage also kept the mortgage and serviced the mortgage. So they wanted it to stay there for a long time. They just collect payments, take their fee, and go on. Now, though, it's 90% of the time you get a mortgage from somebody, that mortgage gets sold in a month to a different company that just buys the mortgage. So you have a company that actually makes the mortgage, then you have a company that buys the mortgage. And so obviously the company that makes the mortgage makes fees off of making the mortgage and then selling them. So that's their incentive. The more mortgages they make, the more money they make. And the company down the line that buys the mortgage, they're hoping you stick around for a while, because they've got to put some effort into this. But you never know who that is until you get the notice from Mr. Cooper or Penny Mac or something that, hey, we're your new mortgage holder. Send your payments to us.
All right. Ash, you mentioned a earlier, before we started taping, you mentioned a couple of other questions. I wonder if you'd like to run those by Frank and Colin now.
Oh yeah. So specifically about the mortgages?
Yes.
Yeah. So kind of just what was like a quick overview of what refining actually is. But then also, what does refining affect the market price of a home? And also, can you end up in the long run paying more for your home than you originally bought it for?
Okay. A refi should never affect the value of your home because, like I said, the mortgage is just made to you and they're sold off. It used to be that you could actually, if you had a favorable mortgage, someone could assume that mortgage. That doesn't happen anymore. You get a mortgage, you go to sell your house, they have to get their own mortgage. Could it possibly affect the value of your home? I think it could possibly affect your value of your home to the upside because if you sell it, the lender is going to find out you sold it and it's going to go away. So there's no way to keep paying on the lower mortgage and wrap it with a mortgage from the new buyer. So, but it's not going to hurt you. A refi is not going to hurt you. Could it end up costing you more? Yes, quite honestly. Say you've been in your house for 10 years, and you've made all your mortgage payments and you've paid it down, and you go and get this new mortgage. Even if you get it for the same amount, so you go get a new 30-year mortgage, well, now you're going to pay interest for an extra 10 years. And you're going to pay the interest on those 10 years when the interest is the most, which is the first 10 years again. So yeah, it could end up costing you more. So part of the trick is now, and lenders are starting to see, well, okay, they'll do a 20-year mortgage. They'll do a 25. They'll do it. I've even heard of 22, just to get people, because the people who are doing the mortgages want to do mortgages because that's how they get paid. So they got to make it work for the customer. So yeah, usually a refinance cannot hurt you unless, of course, you take the money out and buy that boat or that Mercedes or take that vacation to the south of France, and 10 years later you don't have the boat, you don't have the car, and you don't like that trip anymore, and you're still paying off for the next 20 years.
I have a related question, and it's about during the refi process. Generally, they'll send an assessor out to assess the value of your property. And my question is, if the assessment is a lot higher, can that end up biting you when it's time for property taxes?
Not in California. Thanks to Proposition 13, the only decent tax law passed in the last 30 or 40 years, your tax rate is, in its simplest form, is based on 1.2% of the value that you purchased the house at, increased at a maximum rate of, I'm sorry, I forget whether it's 2 or 3% a year. So the only time that changes is if you pull building permits and do improvements to your house. Then they can reassess. But having an appraisal done or refinance doesn't affect the value with the tax assessor at all.
All right. Well, that's good to know. So I guess I'm ready to go out and refi.
Well, I'll be honest, I did mine the other day just because I wanted a mortgage rate under 2%. Because at one time I had a mortgage of 16.5%. Because that was the only mortgage you could get. So
were those the good old days of the late 70s?
Early 80s.
There you go. Well, we don't want to go back in time. I think we should always be moving forward and always towards lower and lower interest rates. And I think, Frank, unless you have any other last words for us, or you guys have, Colin or Ash, you have any other questions?
I have one more question. How many times can you refinance a home legally?
Legally, you could refinance it every day. Practically, though, it's not going to happen, because one, it starts, you're all of a sudden there's all these things on your credit report which looks bad. I would say realistically, the advertisements always are, even if you refinanced in the last 6 months, you can refinance again. I would feel more comfortable telling people a year, because it also, what you can refinance and get the good rate depends on what your credit score is. And if there's too many people looking at your credit, pulling your credit time after time, then your credit score is going to go down. But there's no legal limit as to how many times you can refinance.
All right. All right. Well, I think some good information. Ash, thanks. Some great questions. I think that will wrap it up for this edition of the McAnulty Method. Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you next time.